Hello everyone. In this tutorial, I will show you how to create a question that asks users to specify their preferred price range for a product or service using a range slider. This new input type is now available in SurveyJS out of the box. Apart from the slider itself, our question also includes two additional input fields that stay in sync with the slider. This way, users can either drag the slider thumbs to set the values or manually enter them in the input fields, whichever they prefer. We will also take a look at a single value slider. It works the same way. Users can either move the slider thumb to select the price they've paid for a product or simply type the value into the input field. So let's start by adding a slider question to our form. First, we will set the question name. Let's simply call it Range Slider. Then we will add a title. What's your preferred price range for this product? In the description, we will clarify the currency by saying in US dollars. This makes it immediately clear what units we are asking for. Next, we will switch to the slider settings category. Here, we need to toggle the slider type to range since we want the user to specify both the maximum and minimum values. Now let's adjust the range limit. We will increase the maximum value from 100 to 1000 and set the minimum value to 100. By default it's 0, but we don't need values that low. The slider also has scale labels. They are visual markers that divide the slider into segments. By default, SurveyJS adds 6 labels automatically. Let's reduce that to 5 just to keep things simple. We'll also update step value from 1 to 10 since we don't need high precision here. Now let's set the range length limits. We will leave the minimum as is and set the maximum to 250. This means users won't be able to leave range wider than $250, for example, from 100 to 1000. Let's move on to the scale label visibility. The Show Scale Labels setting is enabled by default and we will keep it that way since labels give users a quick visual overview of the available range. Now regarding the label format, since we're working with prices, we could add $sign to the labels, but this might feel a bit repetitive. Instead, we will use the tooltip for that. So let's add a $sign after the value. Now, when users hover over or drag the slider thumbs, they will see a tooltip that shows the current value with the $sign. We will also enable Allow Thumb Crossing. This allows users to move one thumb past the other if needed, just to give more flexibility in how they adjust their range. The final setting in this category is Show Clear button. Let's enable it. This option adds a button that lets users clear their selected range and start over if they want to change their answer. Now let's switch to the data category. Here, we are going to set the default values for our range slider. Since we limited the maximum range length to 250, let's set the default values to something that fits within the range, say 500 and 750. Then click Apply. Now let's switch to the Preview tab. As you can see, the range slider is automatically set to start at 500 and end at 750. You can easily change these defaults to any other values within the allowed range. For example, if you want the default to be closer to the minimum, you can set it from 100 to 350. To do that, go back to the Data tab, clear the current values, and set the slider to new default values. If your browser set it to the maximum possible range, simply drag it to 750 and 1000. Then click Apply again. That's it. The range slider is now fully configured. Now let's add 2 input fields so users can enter values manually. To do that, we will use single line input question. Let's start by adding the first input field. We will name it min. Keep the input type set to text and set the placeholder to from. Next, we will go into the input mask settings. Since we are collecting price values, we will use the currency input mask. Under currency suffix, we will specify US dollars. Then we will set the minimum value to 100 and the maximum value to 1000 to match the slider range. We don't need decimals here, so we will set the value precision to 0. We will also disable negative values. Then let's hide the question title to clean up the layout. To do this, we need to go to the layout category and locate question title alignment and set it to hidden. Now that the first input field is configured, we will duplicate it and place it next to the original one. In the second input, we will assign it with the name max, since the question name has to be unique. And we'll update the placeholder to 2. This way, users can easily understand that the first field is the minimum price and the second is the maximum. Before linking these fields to the slider, let's make sure the input values update in real time while the user is typing. To do that, we need to go to the server level settings and under Data section, find Update Input Field Values and set it to while typing. Now let's sync the input fields with the range slider. First, we need to select the range slider question and then find the set value expression under conditions category. Here, we will enter the following expression. This tells the slider to pull its values from the 2 input fields named min and max. If your input fields are named differently, you need to replace min and max in the expression. Next, we will connect the slider values back to the input fields. For the minimum input field, let's find its set value expression setting and enter the name of the range slider question, followed by 0 in brackets. And for the maximum input field, let's enter the name of the range slider, followed by 1 in brackets. If your range slider has different name, this part needs to be replaced by it. Now let's preview the form. As you can see, when we enter 600 in the from field, the slider updates automatically. And if we move the slider thumbs, the input fields update in real time as well. And now let's configure a single value slider that will also allow users to enter the value manually. The slider question will ask users to specify how much they paid for the product. Let's call it amount paid. And in the question title, let's enter how much did you pay for the product. In the slider settings, let's keep the slider type to single value. And let's keep the minimum and maximum values the same as in the range slider from 100 to 1000. Because we are asking users to enter exact value, let's keep the step to 1. This means that the slider will move in increments of $1. We will also reduce the number of generated labels to 5 and use the same tooltip format settings as we applied earlier to the slider range. And finally, let's enable the Show Clear button option so users can easily reset the value if needed. Now, we need to switch to the data category and set the default value. Let's set it to, say, 150 and then click Apply to save it. Next, we will need to add an input field for manual data entry and apply a couple of layout settings to make sure that the input field fits nicely next to the slider. We don't need it to span to the entire width of the form or take up half of it. So under layout category, let's set the minimum question width to 200 pixels and then the maximum question width to about 20%. Let's name our question paid value. That's it. Now we're going to apply input masking to ensure the data is entered in required format. And finally, let's bind the data to the slider. To do this, we simply need to copy the name of the slider question, in our case, amount paid, and paste it into the join identifier field under the data category of the second question. This will pass the value from the slider into the other question automatically, keeping both in sync. Now let's test it. If you haven't integrated the Survey Creator component in your application yet, we offer a free full-featured demo on our website. You can add and configure your range slider in a sample form right there. You will find a link to the range slider demo in the description below. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or in our tech support forum.